guys, welcome back to the channel. So I have a super cool guest today. I got Brian from CasmoTV. What's up, Brian?
What's going on, man?
Sounds like we're going to have a pretty
Yeah.
good time today. So tell us
Yeah,
about
look forward to it.
who you are and what your background is, because I only know you as CasmoTV, the guy who is a former. I always thought you were just a former Kiowa pilot, but then I found out the other day that you were also an Apache pilot as well, and you do fantastic videos at CasmoTV over there, which I've highlighted on the Flight Sim News week in and week out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I did fly Kiowas. We got rid of those back, I want to say 2016, and kind of sold those off to some other countries and then scrapped the rest. And then I transitioned over to Apaches and flew them for a couple of years. So I don't fly actively now. I'm still in the Army. I'm getting ready to retire. But yeah, I've been a tank guy, so I was on M1s for a couple of years. I was in mortars for a little while, but a majority of my career has been flying, and mostly the Kiowa. I want to say I got like around 1,700 hours with the Kiowa, and probably about 400 with the Apache. So.
Wow, that's super impressive. I got
Yeah,
to.
well, I mean, it's a decent number. There's guys with, Barundus on my channel. You probably see him if you ever watch any of my videos. I mean, you're talking about like a 5,000 hour guy. So
Holy cow! I listen to I listen to the Fighter Pilot podcast a lot too, and I love what those guys do over there. And the average that I've heard, most of these pilots in general, not just helo, but fixed wing and everything, and all these guys are usually saying they're somewhere around 3,000. So 5,000, dude! Wow.
Yeah.
That's
he's
crazy.
A beast. Yeah, so the way it works, at least for us, is you get your pilot wings when you finish flight school, and then when you hit, I want to say it's 1,500 hours and so many years. I can't remember how many years it is. You get your senior wings, which is wings with a little star on top, and then when you hit 2,000 hours, and I can't remember what the years is, then you get your master wing. So. I got my master wings. I'm happy. After that, who's counting anymore? So.
Wow. So you got to do Abrams too.
Yeah, I started out in tanks when I was a wee lad, and I was on M1 A1s for a little bit. So yeah.
So years ago, back in I want to say 1998 or 99, Novalogic used to do the Armored Fist games. And I had some fun with an Abrams tank as well. They took us out to San Luis Obispo to Fort Roberts and Fort Hunter Liggett, and they let us play around with Abrams and got to take a ride in it at nighttime. I got in the driver's seat, and I'm about
comfy, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what? It really is. And there was some interesting stories that those guys had told us. This was Novalogic took us out for a junket trip, That's where they like fly you out and they want to schmooze you and impress you and show you how real their game is. And it really wasn't that real. But, but it was a great game, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. Novalogic made some great stuff back in the day. They were known for the Comanche series back then as well.
Okay.
But I got in that driver's seat and I was like, wow, this is great. But it's not for everybody because I'm like 6 foot, about 240 pounds right now, and I work out a lot, so I'm not a little fella. And back then I was probably about 225 and 6 foot. But still, it's not an easy thing to get in and out of, and it's a separate compartment.
I'm 6'4".
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a tight fit.
That would be super tight for you, I'd imagine, huh?
Yeah, luckily I was a tank commander, so I got to sit in the back in the turret. But if I ever got into the gunner seat, oh my god, yeah, I just crammed in there. The driver's seat was a little squished, but I mean it's so comfortable. I mean you're practically laying down.
You were. It was like being in a Corvette, dude. And they were telling me stories. They're like, you know what, in the wintertime, that it gets super warm up there, and sometimes the driver falls asleep, so they're like kicking on the metal because it's separate compartments to wake the guy up. They're like, you're going off the road, dude.
Yeah, well, we were on a screen looking for bad guys at a training center and spotted them, and I'm trying to get my driver, it's like 3 a.m., I'm trying to get my driver to move the tank so we can engage. He's fast asleep and we can't get to him, and it's just like you said, we're banging on the side, we're yelling his name, and finally the enemy gets away, and then finally you just hear him over the intercom. Oh, what's going on?
Right? Yeah, because it is that
Yeah,
comfortable, and those things go pretty
yeah.
fast too.
Oh,
For
they're
what is it like? How many
yeah.
tons is that thing again?
Depending on if it's loaded, it's around 60 to 70
I was
tons.
gonna say I kind of remember 70 being a number. I have terrible
Yeah.
memory, but I can remember stuff from way back. I just couldn't tell
I,
you what I did yesterday.
I want to say it was like 68 tons. Yeah, but it's a giant go kart. I mean, it was so much fun to drive. They're a blast.
And if you get them on asphalt, you can really go, right? It's like
Oh
it's
yeah,
when
you
you're
can
in
haul
dirt and
ass.
stuff like that, it gets to be a little tougher.
If I recall, and again, it's been forever since I've been on one, but I want to say it actually has a governor to keep it from going too fast because I mean it's a massive engine in the back. I mean it's a turbine engine, and she will pick up and go, but you've got to have a governor to keep it not going too much because then you'll start throwing axe off and But yeah, they're beasts.
Yeah, that was super fun, man. They also let me shoot the was it like a 120 millimeter howitzer or something? They had a whole
Yeah,
like training thing set up there where they had like the tanks. There was some helicopters flying overhead, and they were practicing
yeah,
shooting this big giant howitzer. And it was one of the ones that like the feet come out and it just plants itself there, and you can fit 3 guys inside of it.
okay,
And I got to pull that rope where you literally like hold this rope in front of your
right,
waist, and you literally
yep,
you turn your whole body basically to pop the cap, you know what I mean, to make
yep,
this thing shoot. And it's based on how many bags you put in there and everything. And
yep,
it was crazy, dude. Like I shot that thing and I had enough time to open it up, swab it out, and they could put their next load in. I climbed out of the thing, they handed me the binoculars, and watched the shell hit the target. That's how long
yeah,
it takes to get from point A to point B. You don't.
yeah. I was a mortar guy, and we had 120 millimeter mortars in the back of old 113 chassis, and it was the same way. You had to put a number of charges on it. Like you pulled out of the case, it had 4, but based on the calculations, maybe you need 3. So you'd pull one of them off real quick, and you just drop it in the tube. And I mean, 120 millimeter round that's serious business. It's like a
Yep.
36-pound warhead you're throwing down range. So yeah, that stuff's a lot of fun. And like you said, yeah, it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, like I didn't like get that until that day. I was like, oh my god, it actually takes that long for me to shoot it, get
Yeah,
out, clean it up, step out, get the binoculars, and then watch it hit its target. And they had like these big, I don't know what they were made of. They look like silhouettes of like T-72s or something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They were just like, I don't know if
yeah,
they're big iron pieces or what they had out in the middle of the desert there, but it was pretty nuts, man. And it was super hot. It was like 120 degrees out there or something. And they're like, you can't smoke out here, and if you do, there's a certain place to put your butts, because like
yeah,
you catch the whole place on fire, like California's on fire right now.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of crazy how
Unfortunately,
that works. So what are you
yeah.
doing these days, other than the awesome stuff over at Casmo TV?
Well, I mean, honestly, just preparing to retire. So, Corona's, shut down a lot of different things. And, I just moved to North Carolina from Louisiana a couple of months ago. So the new job I've gone into is basically there's not much going on. So I've got a lot of free time, which is good because again, I'm transitioning and preparing for life after the military, and I've got some things lined up. So it's giving me time to kind of prepare for that. And it gives me, honestly, a lot of time to work on the channel, which, normally I probably wouldn't have. So it's been good to allow me the time to build that sort of baseline and get some things going. And I've come across some good dudes to help me with that who've just kind of, sacrificed their time and energy and in some cases money just to help me get this going. So it's been really awesome.
It's awesome stuff, man. The one thing I've noticed is there's 2 ends of the spectrum when it comes to the flight sim community. There really is, and it's crazy. But you've got the end of the spectrum, which is the worst end of the spectrum. You know what I mean? Where you have these guys that are just so opinionated, they're so full of piss and vinegar. You know what I mean? They hate and shit on everybody, and they're fucking right about everything. You know what I mean? And it's usually the guys that are. I think you were telling me you're about what, 40 years old?
Oh, I think I lost you. Sorry, I lost you there for a second. I heard piss and vinegar, and that was the last thing I heard.
Oh, well, those guys, that's the one end of the spectrum. Those are the guys that always
Right.
think they're right about everything. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's usually an older crowd. I think we were talking before, and you said you're what, about 40 years old?
Yeah, 42.
42. I just hit 50. So my age and above seems to be that other range of guys in the flight sim community, and it's been this way forever. This goes all the way back to the 90s.
Yeah,
There's just a very opinionated group, and they know everything.
yeah.
I hate to say it, but it's almost like it's the majority of the guys that are on Reddit for the biggest part. And then
Well, we have a kind of a saying in the Army and probably other places as well. Is you spend 99% of your time dealing with 1% of the population. Um, you know, I fully expected going into this to catch so much shade from people. Like I was just waiting for, especially, oh my God, especially when I put out a video about the Gazelle. I
oh
just
yeah,
and I just braced myself for like,
I saw that
I'm gonna
coming
just
too.
take it, and I didn't though, and that's what really shocked me. Like, yeah, there's those onesies and twosies,
Yep.
and generally speaking, they're already that way anyway, and they're gonna have that opinion. But it's been my experience that a vast majority of people are either they do care, like have a positive engagement with you. And even some that don't, like they kind of just come off a little salty. I think I think the fact that we type to each other is part of that. Because you see it all over Facebook, you see it on everything, right? You lose the benefit of tone, and also, of course, people are a lot more courageous when they don't have to look you in the eye. But even some of those people that have kind of come off kind of shitty, if I just engage them and talk to them, they kind of come around a little bit and they say, "Oh, okay, I see." But it's this sort of just default go to the worst case scenario that there are a few that fall into that trap, and it's unfortunate. But I've been really surprised and happy to see that a majority of the people that I've had to interact with have been nothing but positive and super cool. And I say that as well for the people like from my own community, because another thing that really worried me was like, what are other Army guys going to say, or what are other helicopter pilots going to say? I've always been waiting for that hammer to fall, like someone to swoop in and say, well, actually, this about helicopters. And that hasn't happened, and I don't think it's going to happen because I've had so much support from those guys. I mean, I have dudes on my Discord who, we talk about 5,000 hours. I got guys on there with more than that, who have been everywhere and flown all kinds of things. And they are so supportive, and they're not just of me, but of everyone else in the community. So it's been a really positive experience, a lot more positive than I expected.
That's awesome. You've been very fortunate because, like I was saying, you've got the one
Yeah,
spectrum that's those guys that are just the piss and vinegar, and they know everything. And then there's the other part of
yeah,
the community, which I think, and I like to consider myself part of that community, the other community, which is like you and I are the guys that, we've talked about this, and I think it's all about helping people and all about helping
yeah,
each other. And my aim more than anything, and it's been this going back almost 3 decades when I first started writing about flight sims, is I'm here to kind of help further the community. You know what I mean? And
right.
do
That's right.
things to bring awareness of flight sims, because in the overall scheme of things, we have always been and probably always will be the minority in terms of game software. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
out there, and it always has been. And now more than ever, the flight sim genre is, if it wasn't for a DCS World, IL2, now Microsoft Flight Simulator, even I hate to say it, some people will criticize me for it, but even War Thunder, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
the Ace Combat series, there was always the games and the simulations, and there really
Yeah.
isn't that many today. Like the 90s really was the dawn of the flight sims. It started in the
Oh yeah.
80s, but the 90s is when it really was the golden era. We had so
Yep.
many games. I was talking to, I can't remember who it was, on one of my last interviews I did. I think it was the guys from Team Fusion. Yes, it was the guys from Team Fusion Simulations that do Desert Wings to Brook for IL2, and
Uh-huh.
they reminded me of there was an F-16 aggressor from like Virgin Media or something like that. There was like
Mm.
so many. Like there was 3 or 4 Apache sims back in the day. We don't have
Oh
one
yeah.
now. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, yeah,
Well,
it's
I
like,
mean, the other thing that I think has contributed to I don't say a lack, but certainly less diversity is, well, one, DCS and IL2, they cover such a broad spectrum now of of so many aircraft that it's like you're kind of balling a lot of different games into one. But the learning curve is so much higher than it was than when you did play. You know, I was thinking about, as I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking about you know, what games did I play growing up? And I think the first flight simulator I ever played was F-15 Strike Eagle 2 from Microprose. You know, and that was like 1989.
Yep.
You know, there was like 4 buttons. You know, like it wasn't very complicated at all.
No.
And now, I mean, Jesus, you got guys memorizing how to start up an A-10. You know, like real life. And so I think it's intimidating to a lot of people, but at the same time, it's very fascinating for the people who actually care enough to want to learn that stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting time right now.
It totally is, and that goes back to what I've been said in the past, you know, on my channel, is that I enjoy flight sims like to no end, but there are certain things that, just because I'm from that golden age when I began, so there was less complexity. I always appreciated the complexity to be in my flight modeling, to be in how my weapons work, to be how accurate my weapons are, to how accurate my radar systems are, how accurate maybe the environment is simulated around me. But personally, I could care less about sitting there for 10 minutes to start something up, man. You know what I mean?
I know exactly. And anyone on my Discord knows my thoughts on this. And I hate the startup shamers, right?
Yes.
Because I see them on Facebook all the time, and they want to shame you about if you, because my big thing, like, I'll make the joke, like, I'll log into a multiplayer server, jump into a cockpit. Oh, it's cold? Nope, out. I won't play on that server because I don't have time for that.
That's how I am too, dude. I don't have 20 minutes for that. I want to jump in and have fun, man. You know,
right? Like every now and then, like, sure, the wild hair of I want to go through the startup procedure, but it's been had that wild hair. But my point is, like, okay, if I spend 10 minutes starting up, another 5 minutes taxiing out, doing all this crap, and then I glitch on takeoff and I run into a tree.
Yes.
Right? Now I got to go through all that crap again. Like, I don't feel like that, you know? And I remember one guy it was so funny, you know, because obviously nobody knows who I am, and that's fine. I don't want you to necessarily, but I made a comment to somebody about the startup procedures, and he's like, well, just be a better pilot. And I showed him a picture. I showed him a picture that I took in Iraq like 2 years ago of me in an Apache, and it showed, there's a page on the Apache, and it'll show like your cockpit temperature. And it was 120 degrees in my cockpit, and we were starting the engines. And you got to sit, you know, you're spending 30, 45 minutes starting up an Apache.
Oh, yeah.
It's not this 5 minute, like, oh, DCS startup, I'm good to go. And I was like, look, dude, when you're sitting in a cockpit, sweating your bags off in 120 degrees for 45 minutes, come talk to me. Until then, you know, I'm auto starting this bad boy. But for people that they want to immerse themselves, and I totally understand that, because there is some benefit to going through a startup procedure. Like, there's procedures that happen in your mind, and it's like, okay, if I go through the startup procedure, I'm setting up the aircraft the way I wanted, versus jumping into one that's hot and then trying to basically play catch up with the aircraft. So I understand that. And again, my point is, like, look, if that's how you want to play, that's fine. Don't shame me for wanting to do it the other way, or others. And it goes back to your point, like, don't be that dude. Like, it's a game. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you can get hung up on it's a flight simulator, it's a game. To me, it's all the same. How you treat it kind of depends on it being a simulation or not. But do it how you want to do it because it's your money. And then that guy, do it how he wants to do it because it's his money.
That's what I've said all along, and I've said this time and again when it comes to that. I've always said that, look, man, I paid what I paid for it. You paid what you paid for it. I'm going to play it the way I want to play it, you know? And that does happen, you know, like, and I don't get it either. But then again, you know what I mean? Like, I think the internet age in general has done a few things, like you were saying about, you know, typing. I mean, typing, just text in general between, like, me and my girlfriend, or you and your wife, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff can get you in trouble, just like it can online. You know what I mean? Because you don't get the voice, you don't get the voice inflection. You know what I mean? You can't tell if somebody's kidding or not. You can't tell how serious somebody is. So I think that goes hand in hand with this generation in general. I think, you know, and some like. I'm very blunt and to the point. So, you know, a lot of the times me typing something is, you know, people are going to take one of two ways. Either they're going to get, I'm blunt and to the point, or I'm an asshole. And it's usually the later, you know. But I'm really not. You know, I'm probably the easiest guy in the world to get along with, you know what I mean? And that's my aim. But again, I think that's the whole thing in general, is that, you know, there's a lot of great people in the flight sim community, and since doing the channel myself, I've found a lot more of them. And I
Yeah.
like the fact that the even though I've only got what 2,700 people or something subscribing right now, I like those people. You know what I mean? Because those people kind of
Yeah.
line up with what I think. You know what I mean? And like if somebody
Well, and
comes
if you're
along.
anything like me, you've got twice that watching. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
only half
yeah,
those people subscribe. So
exact. That's what it comes down to, dude. That's what it really does come
yeah,
down to. And I can care less
yeah,
about the ones that disagree with me. You know what I mean? Because there's always going to be that. And being in this industry as long as I have, and developing thick skin is the number one thing you have to do. You know what I mean?
sure.
That's just it, because there's always going to be a critic. You yourself
Well,
are a
all you can,
critic. So there's always going to
yeah.
be a conflicting, opinion, I guess,
Well,
is what it
it's a
comes down to.
matter of, it all. We're getting kind of metaphysical, I guess, but it's all kind of like how you deliver information is important, and that's what people just need to remember. And I think it's important for people like us who have channels and we're talking to so many people. It's not about I don't like something or this or that. It's just kind of being it's just articulating the why you feel a certain way.
Yes.
I always try to give myself like a trap door exit on things when I talk about something, and like, this is my opinion on it. However, I also acknowledge that I'm kind of an idiot, so I may have
Yep.
missed something, or I'm not thinking about something. And generally, people will comment on my videos and say, "Oh, you can do X," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, shoot, I didn't even think about that, or I didn't know that."
Well, you've hit the
So
nail on the head, because I've reviewed, like I said, games and flight sims and PC hardware for almost 3 decades, and the number one thing I always tried to look at when I was reviewing something, not just presenting information in general, but if I were going to review something, the way I always looked at it is I always put my opinion in there, but I put enough facts in there that
yeah,
somebody could, basically come up with their own conclusion as well. I think you,
right,
you,
yeah.
you do the best job when you sit there and you provide enough facts about something, good or bad, you know what I mean? And then at the end, in your conclusion, you would always go, well, this is how I feel because of this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, that way, what it comes down to is then, people do have all the information they need. And I think those are the best kind of reviews, instead of just,
Yeah.
man, that sucks, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It doesn't do what I think it should do. I'm like, well, okay.
Yep. But why?
Right.
What's
Yeah. What's that
present,
based on?
what isn't present, that kind of thing in general.
Yeah.
So let's talk sims. What was your first flight sim? You said F-15 Strike Eagle 2?
Yeah. I want to say I was actually looking because I wanted to get my story straight. So I think, it was definitely 15 Strike Eagle 2, followed very closely because they came out around the same time. A-10 Tank Killer. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes, Sierra Dynamics.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which is funny. I was looking at screenshots of it. I'm like, oh my God. Like, it
Oh,
looks
all
awful.
those look fucking terrible compared to
They,
today. They really
yeah.
did.
But then you remember it very differently. And I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and I think we were kind of talking about VR and things. And I said, maybe it's just my age and the things that I grew up on, but I'm okay with not great graphics these days because it's so much better than what I grew up with. And I remember that. And I think back then there was a lot of theater of the mind going on. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah,
your
definitely.
mind kind of saw things a little bit differently. And of course, when you're a kid, there's just magic involved. But yeah, looking at so flight the Strike Eagle, A-10 Tank Killer, and then Knights of the Sky, which is an old World War I game. Those were probably the three like formative aircraft games that I played early on, and they all look like absolute garbage when I look
Yeah,
back.
Knights
But
of the
at the
Sky.
time,
Was that
yeah,
Microprose? I think that was a Microprose
I think
title
it
too.
was. And then Dynamics came out a couple of years later with Red Baron, which of
Yep.
course was mind blowing compared to Knights of the Sky.
Oh, definitely.
And so much fun. And honestly, when I play Flying Circus, like that is why I love Flying Circus so much, because I guess in my mind it just takes me back to that where it was so much simpler. It was like, okay, I'm just turning on, I'm taking off, and I'm gonna go fight bad guys. Like I don't have to worry about a radar. I don't have to worry about all this other random stuff. It's just take off and fly. And I love it.
I dig Flying Circus too, man. In VR, I'll tell you what, some titles in VR are just don't play well. DCS is one of them,
Yeah.
and it's due to just lack of good optimization. But
Right.
the guys at 1C, I think, with the engine they have and the improvements they've made, man, in VR, it's something else. I don't know if you saw the
Yeah.
one video a while back, but I did a video on flying Circus. I think it was my first impressions video. And I was flying along, and I was in VR. And the shadows in there, how you can see shadows of things while you're in the cockpit if there's somebody behind you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm flying along,
Yep.
and I'm flying along, and I'm into it. You know what I mean? How you go deep, and you're in there. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
nothing else in the world's bothering you. You're just there. And then like I got startled because I saw this shadow, and somebody stood up behind me, and it was the guy in the back seat with the gun. You know what I
Right.
mean? The gunner stood up, and he starts shooting at the guy in front of me. I was like, whoa, like that just
Yeah.
freaked me out, man. I did not expect that. But that's some of the stuff that we have today that like is just the next step. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Compared to what we had, and again, the flight models and everything. I mean, I'm no real pilot. You know what I mean? But I've been around this stuff enough years to know that if this feels realistic or not. You know what I mean? I've flown in real planes,
Yeah.
and I've done enough flight sims to know that if it feels like fluid motion to me, I guess you know what I mean. That
Yeah.
you don't have the
And that's-
sensation of everything around you, but you do know if something feels right or not to a degree. And wow, does it feel good in that, man? You almost feel like
Yeah,
those
I
things
love
are
it.
gonna snap. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's just wooden rags, right? Like most of that stuff. It's fucking broomsticks and curtains, dude. You know what I mean? That held these
Yeah.
planes together.
I don't think there's one flight that I've done for my multiplayer campaign that I film that I haven't started that conversation. It's just quiet. And I'm just like, can you imagine flying this thing? Like we're at 10,000 feet. Like I'm a helicopter guy. When I go above 3,000, I get nervous.
Right.
But to think about being in this wooden crate with a lawnmower engine pulling me through the sky at 10,000 feet, I'm probably cold as hell, and shit's just whipping around next. Like, oh, it's just terrifying to think about. And I mean, these guys were doing it all the time.
And they got it
it's
so
just
right.
fascinating.
They got it
Yeah.
so right, man. Like a lot of people gave him shit because my understanding is, and I remember Rise of Flight. I reviewed that years ago too, but I don't remember the plane set. But I mean, my understanding is the plane set from Rise of Flight was basically ported over to Flying Circus. And that was kind of the project. I think Jason Williams was on the show once, and we were talking about that, and that's what they did. They really just wanted to bring the Rise of Flight over to the IL-2, Great Battles platform. But in the end, like it's something that they enjoy so much as well. But people were criticizing them, like, oh, well, it's just the Rise of Flight planes, and there was no content. Fair enough, because it was like $70 when it first came out, But they have those half-off sales all the time too.
That's when I got it. Yep.
Like it's not like it's never going to be cheaper. And just a couple updates ago, they came out with I want to say 2 campaigns worth of single-player content for it. So like,
Yeah, I think I was
Awesome.
watching Wolfpack do that. There was like 12 missions, I think. And honestly, if you get that Pat Wilson campaign generator, it is like suddenly transporting yourself back to 1990 and playing Knights of the Sky, because the campaign generator will just poop out a mission, and it's just it's simple, like go take off and fly this pattern, go take off and bomb this target, and it is so like 90s era feel to it. I love it to death because it never stops. Like you don't need all this crazy scripting and stuff. It just gives you something to do, and you just go do it, and you will run across the enemy, and you will fight, and you will have a great time. And it keeps track of your little kills, and all that stuff. And it's just so much fun. And so when people complain about that there isn't content, I don't disagree with that comment. It is a little pricey, $70 for, okay, you got 12 missions. But yeah, if you get on half off, do it. Absolutely.
I've been meaning
And
to
hopefully
get
they come
that.
out with a new one. I'm waiting for volume 2.
They told me about that Pat Wilson, whatever, mission generator when I did the IL-2
It's
interview.
awesome.
And I have to dig into that and download that. I just have fun with the missions that are in there, to be honest. You know what I mean? I'm more of a single player than a multiplayer guy because of some of the things you spoke of already. Where like with DCS, man, most of the servers, the ones that at least have many people on there, they usually make you start cold. And I'm like, I do have a day
Yeah.
job. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I do have a day job, man. Like, and I have a girlfriend, and I like to spend
Yeah.
time with her. I've got kids as well, even though they're grown up now. I like to spend time with my family, my girlfriend. I like to do things outside of this, and I don't want to spend that 20, 25 minutes to get up and do something. You know what I mean?
Well, my
That's
server
wasted
is
time to me.
all the aircraft are started, so you can jump in with us.
Oh, that's awesome. I may actually do that, because
Yeah.
that's what keeps me from doing multiplayer more than anything. So I'm more of the single player guy because number two, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, but let's talk about this as a topic next. That, you know what? So you've been a Kiowa pilot, you've been an Apache pilot. So if you knew anything, I would think you would remember most of that stuff because you've done it and you've done it for real. But how hard is it to jump into DCS and if you've got more than two planes to
Yeah.
remember how to do everything every single time,
Oh yeah.
to get it right? Man, I get confused. I'm in like a different MiG and I'm like, oh fuck, what's the procedure here? And
Yeah.
I'm trying to do stuff like in
I
the 21 and the 19.
Yeah, I flew. We have a Thursday night fight night, so it's just kind of like, hey, I don't care who you are, where you are. If it's Thursday night, get online, get on our server, and just trying to generate some activity that way,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of build the community. And so I did one, and I started out I think in an A10, and then I jumped to the K50 halfway through, and it was kicking my butt. So yeah, it's hard because you try to map your controls to so that they all sort of align,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's hard, and I mean it's work, and I'm impressed. Like, it's funny, I don't get too hung up on a lot of the technical details in any of these modules. I know just enough to be dangerous, and that's basically all I care about. Because I just, the same with you with the startup, like I don't have time to really devote and look through the manual and try to figure out all the nuanced things. Like, hell, it was 2 days ago I learned how to do something in the A10 that you could do forever. And I've had the A10 since it was a separate module before DCS World was even a thing.
Exactly.
Um, and I finally looked through the manual the other day for the first time in over a decade, because the new one was coming out and stuff. And I was like, oh crap, I didn't know you could do that. So I don't dig too much into it. And so I'm kind of blown away by some of these guys that can not only take the time to look through that stuff and learn it, but then like remember it. Like,
Exactly.
I don't have the brain space anymore for that stuff.
Me neither, man. The hard drive is full, brother.
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, it's funny what you can remember. Like, you could put me in a Kiowa right now and I could start it up. I could read off the checklist to you to start it. And I haven't flown one of those since 2011, maybe 12. You put me in Apache right now, I would be a drooling moron because I just didn't have as much time in it. And I would definitely have to go through the checklist. So, and I think that's what most guys do in DCS. They know what they know and they're comfortable with it. And then they just learn a little bit as they go. But there are those rare birds out there who can just absolutely absorb all of that knowledge. And I mean, it's great. They're great to fly with because they can remind you how to do stuff. But then you feel like an idiot, Like, I'll fly with guys who are 20 years old. I'm like, hey, how do I share my speed?
Yep.
And they're like, oh, you're gonna do this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's some sharp cookies out there, man. And I think it is younger more than older when it comes to that, Like I said, I just turned 50 recently, man, and my hard drive's full, brother,
Yep.
I can learn
There's
some
no
new
more room
stuff.
on the iceberg.
Yes, you could teach an old dog so many new tricks, but not too many. So, and I think one of the ones that I really like a lot that is such a foreign bird to me that I've only learned to do a few things in it. I wish I could figure out more is the Vigan. That is one. Oh.
Yeah, I've never flown it, and some guys were talking about it the other day, and I was like, maybe I'll get that because they were saying it's actually kind of easy, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's foreign. Everything in the cockpit is kind of weird and different spots set up differently. You know what I mean? Like, I guess when it comes to like, Western aircraft, like you can kind of jump into an F-18 or an F-16, even a Tomcat,
Yeah.
and there's some commonality there. You kind of know where over here is this, over there is
Yeah.
that, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
jump into the Vigan and I'm just like, whoa, it's completely different, and I guess it's
Oh yeah, same
hard
with the
to
Black
learn.
Shark. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The
Yeah.
Black Shark. Oh my God, that's like I've had that one forever too, and I've still never mastered it. Like
Yeah.
just to slow it down. Every time I get in on it, I'm overspeeding no matter what I do. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the autopilot wants to kill you.
Oh, it's and maybe you saw my video. I don't know. It was one of my early videos, and I talked about that. Like, I had the Black Shark when I was still a Kiowa pilot, and I hated it. I just put it away. I was like, I can't fly this thing. I don't understand what's happening. And then years and years later, when I became an Apache guy, and it flies very differently. It's got different systems and stuff. And I went back to the Black Shark, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is kind of like an Apache, and it made a lot more sense with all those modes. But yeah, if you don't know anything about it, if you just pick that up off the shelf and say, well, I'm gonna fly this Black Shark, yep, you're gonna crash.
Yes,
It's a beast.
It's a foreign bird. I saw that video too, and and that's one of your earlier videos. After seeing that,
Yeah.
I did actually jump back in and try the Black Shark again with a different kind of mindset. And I can
Yeah.
fly it okay now, but it's then
Yeah.
remembering how to get it to stop. You know what I
Right.
mean? To be able to kind of get into a spot where you could start like shooting off some Vickers and actually having
Yeah.
fun with it. But the Vigan is the foreign bird that is the most foreign to me, I think, out of all of them. And but the cool thing is man, is it really like just devastating with those crazy bombs that it has? Like I
Yeah.
never figured out the R something, just like this weird missile. It's like a guided missile you can shoot with it too, like kind of like a Maverick. It's their version of it. But the high drag and low drag and just man, and the
Yeah.
rockets, 6 pods, just it's insane. Look at some of my older videos on the Vigan with the rockets, man. Before I had like the 2080 Super video card, like it would lag you when you shot all them missiles at once in a salvo.
Right.
You'd be like, oh my god, this is so cool, but at the same time you're like, ugh.
Yep.
Super fun stuff. Yeah, so my start was, God, it was back with I want to say like in the late 80s too, and it was like on an Atari ST with the first Microsoft flight simulator, and then later my friend had an Amiga, and he back then pirating was rampant. He had a bunch of 5 1/4 discs that had all the Microprose games on it and stuff, and we would plug that Amiga into like a 20-inch TV, and he had a little joystick that looked like some kind of Atari joystick because they didn't have the shit we have today. And I remember just being mesmerized by hearing bloop 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 bloop. You know what I mean? The weird sound effects and stuff. When you're like the bomb was dropping or something. Or
the
just
8-bit sound.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I was like, I loved it. Like Chuck Yeager, Chuck Yeager's Air Combat. And then I kind of remember there was like an F-19 sim too, like they came out with.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was what they thought was going to be the F-117, but I think testers or Revell or somebody came out with a model of what they thought this next stealth fighter was going to be that never existed. So based on a model, then they came out with a game. So kind of an interesting part of history is that that plane never existed.
Right. Yeah, I think that was that a James or a Micropro? I feel like I remember that cover.
The F-19? No, that was Microprose. Yeah, Janes didn't come along until the mid-90s. Janes was that collaboration with EA, and that's something that I just loved the shit out of. I got lucky. I just got into covering flight sims back around like 93 or something like that, and Janes came along around 96, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time. And Andy Hollis, who was the producer that did the original F-15 Strike Eagle, I believe, or no, did he do Strike Eagle 3? I think it was Strike Eagle 3. But anyway, he ended up doing the Janes Longbow series. And there was me and a few other guys a couple of these other guys actually went on to be somebody. C.J. Martin also, I think, worked with Wags on the Super Hornet or Janes F-15. Wags worked for Janes before he worked for Eagle Dynamics. He actually did the Super Hornet sim for Janes. But I got lucky and got to be part of the outside beta testers where they picked a bunch of people that were really deep into flight sims. And man, the Janes stuff, man, Longbow and Longbow 2, like that was just...
Oh, yeah.
And again, it wasn't as realistic as what we have today. But it was my first introduction to learning about helicopters in general and how to fly them. You know what I mean? And
well, I mean,
super
James
fun stuff.
for its time was pretty advanced. And I try to remember the flight model. It was probably garbage, but from a system standpoint, it's funny when I was going through the Apache Delta model course back in like 2015, like we would learn things, and I was like, holy crap, I kind of remember this from James.
Yes.
So
Well, that's
I
the
think
thing.
it was pretty revolutionary for when it came out. And still, I mean, just a great game to remember. It probably would play like crap right now, but yeah, great game.
Well, I think the thing is the fundamentals of helicopter flight. You know what I mean? Like it had your joystick was your cyclic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your throttle was the collective. They incorporated the rudder pedals to be the tail rotor. So it was the first time that I can remember, at least, that you had the fundamentals of helicopter flight. You know, put in your hands. You know what I mean? As analog control devices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and then again, you know, they went on to do Longbow 2, and then, you know, we know that, you know, Microsoft and X-Plane and all the other things that came many years later do helicopter flight really well now as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first one to, you know, teach you that, you know, the cyclic does this, the collective does this, tail rotor functions like this. It's not rudder pedals anymore. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was the first one, I think, to come along and do all that. And that helped me out greatly, having experience with flying helicopters and sims, when my girlfriend got me my birthday present and got me a flight in an R-44 a couple weeks ago. Because I knew better than to yank and bank on the stick, because if I would have, we probably would have wrecked. Because it's very minute movements. Like, it really is only just it's the wrist movements more than anything. You know what I mean? With the cyclic, at least, right?
Minute.
Now, does that
absolutely.
work that way? Like in a Kiowa or in an Apache, is it the same thing? You just kind of minute movements. You're not really yanking and banking.
Oh yeah, there's no yanking and banking. The Apache's kind of weird because it is a lot like the Black Shark in the sense that it always has what's called a force trim active, and you're basically turning it off by clicking a button, or you're just kind of fighting the force trim because you don't care enough, and you're just going to let it kind of ride back to its original position. But for a Kiowa, you know, I described it really, the cyclic as kind of a wet noodle. If you let go of the cyclic, it's going to go wherever it feels like going, and your rotor disc is going with it. And so it's very loose, and, you know, really flying that thing for the most part is just kind of resting your hand on your thigh. And I mean, you could just hold it, you know, with your fingers, just, you know, pinch it essentially if you wanted to, and you're just making minor little corrections here and there. You know, obviously, if you want to do something major, sure, you can. You know, you're going to pull it fairly hard, you know, a couple of inch displacement to the right or left, and for takeoff and landings, you're gonna displace it fore and aft. But just kind of in general, flying from here to there, there's not a whole lot of movement going on.
Now that goes back to another video I saw of yours, actually, where you like created your own new stick, basically.
Yeah.
And I never thought of it until I saw that video, but it goes back to really like what those old World War I planes were like, right? I mean, it was almost like that as well. There was nothing that's going to hold that stick in place. You know what I mean? If you don't hold that where it's going to go where it wants to.
And I will tell you, flying Circus is so much more fun with that joystick. I don't use it for everything, but I absolutely use it for flying Circus because, one, it just counteracts that really strong spring in a Thrustmaster.
Yep.
And, you know, if you fly flying Circus, you know that you've got to put in a lot of a stick to keep it level. And so unless you're flying auto, you know, where you can level off and hit the auto leveler, you're just holding that thing. I mean, just my shoulder was just killing me. But with that stick extension, it makes the game just so much better. It is crazy. But yeah, it feels a lot better. And so I actually flew the, you know, I'm on the test team for Polychop for the Kiowa, and you know, and they're still hammering out the flight model and stuff. And one of the things we were kind of having trouble with is bringing the aircraft to a hover. You know, just kind of drifting and things like that. And I plugged it in one day and played it with that stick extension, and I picked it right up like it was nobody's business. I was like, oh, what happened? Like how did this happen? So there's certain aircraft that sort of, I don't want to say sloppiness, but I guess lack of, I don't even know how to describe it.
Lack of recentering it. Yeah, it doesn't have to recenter.
Yeah. You just there's a sweet spot that you have to find versus some, you know, like I can play with a regular Thrustmaster for all the advanced jets, you know, because you just trim it out. You know, you just want the stick in the center, you just trim it out, you're good to go. And in the Black Shark, I absolutely hate using my stick extension because it's the same thing. But for the Huey, for the Gazelle, for the Kiowa, that stick extension is money. So yeah, if it's something that you can afford or you can build one like I did, it's certainly helpful in certain airframes.
I'm surprised somebody like the Verpals or the VKBs or somebody hasn't come up with something like that yet. There are some really high-end ones out there. I don't know if you ever
Yeah.
check out Helisimmer, Sergio Costa over there.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
he's a really good dude too. He's another guy that I talk to from time to time, and he's actually like PR guy or marketing guy for the new Micropros now as well.
Oh, really?
So check out Helisimmer because they're always talking about like some weird collective device that's being made, and those guys have a lot of great ideas for that kind of stuff too. But
Yeah.
man, those old Sims though, like it was a different time, and it wasn't as
It was.
realistic as what we have today. But boy, you sure thought it was. That's the
Oh,
key
yeah.
thing. I think what
Yeah. When you're a kid, that was realistic enough.
Yep. And then I think what killed the whole golden era of the flight sim was the introduction of Falcon 4.0. That was somewhere
Yeah.
around '99, and that was
I agree.
supposed to
Yeah.
be the golden child. You know what I mean? That was going to be the savior of the flight sims. And it actually destroyed the flight sim industry because it came out and it had so many problems. And it was supposed to be this triple A title, and it really was fantastic for what it was. Still, you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
it, technically, to me, I guess the best analogy would be it's just a DCS module. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
In early access, the way
Yeah.
that Falcon 4.0 was released, because that's what we get these days. It's a different model now. You know what I mean? They'll release
Right.
something and it's an early access and it doesn't have everything. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like and that's a whole nother thing in itself. But I mean that's the business model we have today. And I think in some ways I don't have a problem with it. There's a lot
I
of
don't either.
guys. There's a lot of guys that are just, oh, about Eagle Dynamics, this, that, or the other. I have my own issues with them, and that's a completely different thing altogether, which I won't get into. But I've stood up for them for the fact that, you know what, the early access thing actually makes it easier to develop a flight sim because I've done this so long that
Sure.
I've worked with developers over the years, you know what I mean, in communicating with them and watching these sims being produced, you know what I mean, from alpha to beta to final, and
Yeah.
it takes time and it takes a lot of money to do it. And you know what? It would probably cost $200 to have an F-18 sim that's boxed these days. You know what I mean? To
Right.
have it done the right way. Or,
Yeah.
2 years ago the F-18 came out for DCS, and it's still in early access or whatever, but they're working on it, and it's given them time to do it that way. You know what I mean? So it's a
Well, and they're
different.
getting feedback, and and it opens you up to understand. You're not kind of stuck in your own echo chamber. If it's just the guys in the office and they're the only ones that are playing it, you get to a point where they're not seeing some of the problems that Joe Average, who just bought it in beta, is gonna notice. So I agree with you. I don't have a problem with that model because no one is like doing that and not knowing what they're buying into. Like you're not paying
Exactly.
attention if you're buying a beta and then you're like, well, I don't understand why the radar doesn't work. Well, I mean,
It's
maybe
not
read
done yet.
before you buy. Yeah. Now I get like the criticism for the F-16. I'll tell you right now, I pre-ordered the F-16 and I don't regret it. Like I love it. I
Me
grew
too.
up around F-16s. I mean, just the bubble cockpit alone, I was like, yep, I'll pay $70 for that. But I do get like when you turn it on, you're like, well, holy crap, most of these things are empty. But at the same time, like it all goes back to, in this conversation I've had multiple times, to you, is it a game or is it a simulation? And what do you want to get out of it? For me, it's it's a simulation if I want it to be, but otherwise it's just a game. I'm happy to fly around and go drop, dumb bombs on something in an F-16 because I'll never get to do that in my life. And this looks pretty cool, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, so I think people are kind of losing sight of what beta actually means. But it's also incumbent upon companies to not exploit that, right? And I think that the feeling, particularly with the F-16, not to beat up on ED, it's not really my interest, but I feel like maybe people felt with that one in particular, they kind of were exploited. Like maybe it came out in beta a little worse for wear than all the others who had come out in beta. I don't know. But that seems to be my sense.
That seems to be the general consensus. I would agree with that
Yeah.
statement, but you also hit the nail on the head too with like how I felt about the F-16 is, you know what, man, I got it. I was happy that I can use the helmet-mounted queuing system with an AIM-9X, number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number two, I love dropping dumb bombs because I have shitty memory. I have a hard time learning new things and just figuring out how to
Yeah.
do the laser guided stuff
I can
some
drop
days.
those.
Yes, I can. I don't have to fool around for 20 minutes reading the Chuck's guide. You know what I mean, to get
Yep.
the other munitions done. And give me Mark 82s any day, any day of the week. And I'll have some fun with them. And that's some of the first things that I did with the F-16. But again,
Yep.
when it comes to the community in general, they do have some points. I would say that there are some modules that are out there that have been dragging along, but I think what people have to understand is we wouldn't have as many airframes as we have today if the old business model still existed, because they still wouldn't have
Right.
finished the first two. And some of the money that let's say the new A10 or whatever, that development money you're paying them for, that is going to pay for that, but it's also going to go in towards that next project to start work on that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of overlap going on, and I think it's definitely beneficial to the community because you have more stuff that you can get, but also to the community because of the ability to interact with the developers as it is being developed. And that is something we never had back in the day. In the day, if you bought Jane's Longbow, you got Jane's Longbow, and if there was a problem with it, you might have got a patch or two. And if you were lucky, they gave you 3D support for whatever 3D card was out there. It was a different world. It wasn't just all done in Windows. You know what I mean? So you got stuff like that. You had to pay for an expansion pack if you wanted another campaign or missions, for the Korea, whatever that was they came out with, But it's definitely way more beneficial for us all that they have them in development the way they do in the open beta structure, because people like you and I will find something once in a while too that somebody else didn't see and will report it, you know what I mean? Or the average Joe will find something and report it. And it just helps the process overall, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, it's a checks and balance, and that's there needs to be some level of friction. I think there has to be a little bit of skepticism by people so that the company does stay true to form and understand that they just can't get away with putting out half-ass beta releases essentially. And so it's this kind of fine line of just checks and balances across the board. But yeah, I'm a fan of it. I think it's the right thing to do. And I've never bought a module that was in beta and regretted it.
Same here.
There was this big fanfare about the Harrier recently. Which,
I was getting to that. Yep.
and I'll be honest with you, like I don't keep up with the stuff. Like I don't necessarily stay on Reddit or any of the forums. So like when there was this big hubbub, I was like, oh, I didn't know it was not in beta. Like I thought it was done a long time ago, because it does everything that I wanted it to do. Like I understand that there's certain things that just don't work right, or and I'm like, well, hell, half the time it's probably me. But I thought it was a pretty good module, and then I saw this hate kind of getting thrown around, and then the PR behind that. Yeah, it's.
Well, I think it's two things. Two things when it comes to the Harrier, and I feel exactly how you do about it too, because it does everything that I want it to do. I'm never going to learn everything that it can do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I don't know everything the Apache can do.
I have fun, doing vertical takeoffs and landings, and the challenge in that alone is just fun. I love dropping dumb bombs in it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I love shooting the guns and rockets and stuff like that at ground targets with it. I know I'm not going to dogfight with it. It's just not made to be that. So I'm good with all that, and I feel like it does everything that I need it to do. Granted, there's some issues with it that exist out there that the community has made known. But on the other hand, the only other thing I will say, and this is because I do see all this stuff because I keep up with it for the Flight Sim News more than anything, so I see a little more than most by trying to take in all this data all the time. So
you're looking for it.
Yes. So what I see more than anything, and this isn't a jab at Razbam or anything too, I think Razbam makes great stuff, and for the longest time I couldn't understand the hate that people have for them. People just don't like Razbam, and it's over the Harrier and then the changes to the Mirage, and even I was frustrated with the Mirage at one point because they had just not long ago changed the procedure for doing stuff in the air-to-air mode. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it was let's make it up to speed with what the Mirage, 2000C does today versus what it was
Right.
when they released it. So it's a two-edged sword. Do you want them to make this realistic,
Yeah.
or do you want them to, or you don't want them to change what you're used to? But at the same time, they're the one developer I notice if you watch their Facebook page, because that's where they kind of throw out the tidbits nonstop. They're almost all over the place all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
I have noticed that.
I almost feel like they're the one developer out of all these DCS developers out there that I think they make a great product. I'm not, snubbing them
Yeah.
for anything that they do. I think they make a great product. I think that they have some great things in the works as well, which I'm dying to get my hands on. F-15 Strike Eagle, like, oh my God,
Oh, yeah.
right? That's the one,
Autobot.
and I think they're going to do a great job with it. But Jesus, man, they're everywhere, all over the place between, Falklands
Yeah.
and aircraft they're doing for that, and Strike Eagle, and the
Yeah.
50 other projects they're working on. So I think some of their friction that they get from the community is their own doing.
Yeah.
By, maybe don't tell us all that stuff that you're doing. You know what I mean? And
Right.
show us
Because
more
it's
of
an optics game at that point,
It
right?
is.
Because if I'm unhappy with the Harrier, and we see this all the time just across the board, but I'm unhappy with the Harrier, and then I see you announcing the 5th module that you're working on, obviously my human gut reaction is to say, okay, but you haven't finished this other thing that I've already paid for. It doesn't matter that team of dudes that are working on that problem, you don't see that, and they're not necessarily broadcasting it, and then it devolves into humans being crappy to other humans, and that's what I just see all the time. Not to say all the time, but that's what I see in the community, is just throwing shade at each other about stuff. And it's like, okay, but we're not actually communicating. We're not making reality known. So,
But yeah, I absolutely love the Harrier too. I for the longest time it was probably my second or third favorite, out of all the modules that are out there. But so out of the modules that you have in DCS World today, what is your favorite?
oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm really digging the new A10.
Mhm.
The problem with the A10, I say it's a problem. It's like being on cheat mode with that thing, because if you ever, like, that's the only thing I flew for the longest time. And then when I finally branched out after years of that and I started flying other things, I was like, holy crap, I'm already out of bombs. And then you go back to the A10, you're like, oh, I can do this all day long. I got plenty of ammo. And so I almost feel like I'm cheating when I say I like the new A10. I love the helmet mounted queuing system. I would have paid $10 for that. I don't care about the laser guided rockets. I don't care about laser guided Maverick. I don't even like laser guided Mavericks. I don't need another laser guided bomb. I don't care about that stuff. But that queuing system makes all the difference in the world. In fact, I just posted a video today where we were flying around using that stuff, and there's just little tips or little tricks that you can learn with it and stuff. And it reminded me a lot of the Apache. There's a lot of capability that we also had in the Echo model Apache that kind of mirrored that. And the situational awareness is just amazing, and it's a lot of fun. I do like the Black Shark. I guess I would say from a helicopter standpoint, the Black Shark is my favorite. One, because I just don't like carrying stuff. Like, I want to go shoot stuff. So I don't know why we have so many like lift helicopters. Like, okay, okay, I guess you can put a bunch of rockets on the Mi-8, but like,
I know
why? Like, I don't know why you would do that. But and the Huey just seems so out of place to me. Like, I'm glad it's there. Okay, like, what is the environment that we're supposed to use this in? And this is what I think DCS, I would love to just chat with these dudes about this in particular. What is the time frame, if you're Eagle Dynamics, what is the time frame of human history that you are trying to focus on when we talk about having F-16s, F-18s, all this stuff? Because to me, I'm thinking like early 2000s time frame. And what I mean by that is air defense capabilities are so intense right now. And then you get into, stealth aircraft and stuff. It's getting to the point where, I see people talk about, oh, I want an F-35. Why?
No, you
Why
wouldn't.
Do you want an F-30?
Or even
Why
a
do you want
Raptor.
that?
Why would you want a
Yeah.
Raptor? Because you would just be the fucking I win button. You know what I mean?
Right.
It would dominate
people
everything.
Are complaining about the Phoenix missile. I mean, that's an old ass missile, and people complain about it all the time. It's too good. So, like, we kind of just need to like hammer in, like, okay, this is the time period that we're trying to replicate. And so I kind of go back to my point with the Huey. It just seems very out of place for all the environments. And so I was talking to the Baltic Dragon a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this, and we both agreed we need to go backwards in time. Like, we need to start going back where technology isn't king, and it's a mixture of technology and pilotage, right? And the Vietnam era is really where that probably came into play most of all.
Oh, definitely.
And I mean, you've got great iconic aircraft there. I mean, you already got the Huey, just church it up a little bit. You got the Phantoms, you got the Thuds. There's just some great stuff going on, and then it's just enough technology to be interesting. I think the bar to learn is a little bit lower. I mean, I have the Hornet. I'm intimidated to fly it. I've flown it like 4 times. Somebody gave it to me, and I'm super thankful for it. I'm intimidated to get in it because every time I do, I'm like, oh my god, like I can't possibly learn all this stuff. I think it would be cooler to have just kind of an older plane where you got some old steam gauges and stuff. But
I think the Hornet's actually the easier one out of all the new ones, to be honest. But
is it really? Yeah, I think it just looks scary.
It does. It's got a lot going on. Yeah.
Well, it's a weird kind of mixture of new and old, and that's what I noticed when I first jumped in. I just kind of looked around the cockpit, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of gauges and switches.
Yes, exactly.
But then
came
there's
out in the 80s.
A lot of screens. Well, yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I don't keep up with my blocks. Like, yep. I don't know. Like, this particular model, is this indicative of 2000? What? I don't know. But it's got a lot of mixture of technology in there, and that kind of surprised me. But yeah, I think it's just the way they term stuff. It's very different, like, than if you jump in an F-16. Like, the F-16 to me it made a lot of sense coming from the A-10, whereas the F-18 seems to be like it's a whole different language.
Well, you know what? I mean, technically, F-16 and A-10 are really close. You know what I mean? In that's that early '70s to mid '70s tech when they came out. Now the block that they're simulating, I'm sure, is like probably a mid 2000s or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
But still, and that's the thing. The Huey, I'll tell you what, I love the Huey in DCS, but just for flying a helicopter. I like how you can hear the different pitch in the rotors when it's getting stressed a little bit. You know what I mean? It almost like those are the kind of cues, I guess, that you can get that kind of tells you something's going on versus what we don't have in the sim, which is the real world, like I was talking about. You know what I mean? But it used to be a lot more fun. They came out with an update a while back that actually nerfed the effectiveness of those guns on the Huey on some of the ground targets. So some of my earlier videos, I was going in there and just crushing shit and loving it. Like, just coming in there, in the back of my head, I can hear what's that song, the Valkyries from, like, Apocalypse Now.
Flight of the Valkyries.
Flight of the Valkyries, right? I'm just kind of da 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 da, and I'm just flying in there, and I put those dudes on go ape shit. You know what I mean? The gunners, and they were just like mowing everything down. And there was a couple missions that were really fun like that. And then they came out with that nerf that they did, and all of a sudden now I'm not able to have as much fun in it. So, and that goes back to, I think, some of what we're talking about too, is these are really games, even though it's a simulation. And I think what we're missing in everything that's out there right now really is that old school complete package where things were just realistic enough to be fun, but just fun enough to not be completely realistic. You know what I mean?
Well, I think maybe part of it is access to knowledge that we just didn't have as kids. And I've noticed this since I've kind of started my own little community and things, that the questions that I get from people about helicopters are so in the weeds.
Yeah.
And they talk about things that, like, real helicopters don't spend a lot of time talking about. Like, they'll use terms and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
They read it in a book somewhere or online, or they're like, so at this temperature of the day, and if you're going this fast, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's insane.
Who even thinks about that shit,
and so I think that's part of it, because they have the ability to look somewhere and say, oh, that's not right. Or we didn't do that. Like you're flying around the A-10 simulator in 1990. You don't know. Like, does it go straight? Does the engine work? Okay, I guess this is right. Whereas now there's guys that are they're pouring over the charts, and in particular the helicopter community. This is why I will always argue that it's a game, not a simulation, because there's so much nuance, and I think we were talking about this earlier. There's so much
Yep.
nuance to flying a helicopter that you just can't capture it. And and
No.
Polychop is trying to do a great, and I'm going to kind of use them as an example because they're doing their due diligence. They've got all the books, right? They've got all the charts that say, okay, at this temperature, at this weight, with this much torque applied, this is what should happen to the helicopter. And yeah, that's great book knowledge that an engineer came up with. And so one of the things that we discovered when working with them was they were using this chart naturally at very low airspeeds. And what we were trying to tell them is like, well, no one really references that at these low airspeeds. No one cares below 40 knots. I don't remember what we were talking about. But I'm never looking necessarily at my torque at this particular time. And so these numbers were just sort of, they didn't really matter because to us, we're like, well, this doesn't feel right. And they're like, yeah, but that's what the book says. I said, I got it. That's what the book says. I don't know if the book is right or wrong because I never referenced that. But I can tell you it doesn't feel right.
Well, they're over simulating. You know what I mean? Like based
right,
on numbers.
So,
yep.
Yeah, and so I get into these conversations with these guys, not Polychop, but just regular people that they get very hung up on some of these sort of aerodynamic, idiosyncrasies of helicopters, and you try to tell them like, okay, but that doesn't matter, or that's not something that we really care too much about. And so I think the helicopter flight sim community will constantly be a little bit underwhelmed with product, and that has nothing to do with the developers. It has everything to do with the challenge of it. We fly simulators in the military that are multi-million-dollar simulators. With several processors and video cards and all this stuff, and it still doesn't feel right. So your $2,000 I just bought it on Amazon computer is also not going to feel right.
Right.
And so you got to kind of accept that at some point. And that's what that's the only kind of hate I ever get from people when I talk about the Gazelle, because you're right, the Gazelle doesn't fly great, but it flies well enough that I'm okay with it. And I've flown with, and I've talked to guys who have flown Gazelles, and they're like, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but if you do this, this, and this, it actually feels pretty good.
That's kind of how I felt about it based on my experience just with helicopter sims in general. I was like, I don't know what everybody's complaining about. The only thing I can't do is make the thing hover. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just couldn't get it into a hover.
And that's what I laugh about too. It's like, I can't hover it. Well, how long have you been flying it? Because I will tell you this. I learned how to auto-rotate a helicopter before I learned how to hover. Hovering is hard. It is an actual skill that it takes weeks to hone in and learn. So I'm sorry that you didn't buy this module and then 2 hours later you couldn't hover. Like that's okay. You want a simulation? There you go, dude.
Right. And that's what we don't have. I think it's even more important in helicopters than it is in fixed wing aircraft, is all those nuances of the environment around you that you feel while you're in the helicopter. And this is what we were talking about before we started recording, was that when I did my little helicopter flight that my girlfriend bought me for my birthday, I was like almost scared shitless while I was flying this thing because my body was not used to all the feedback I was getting. It was a little bit windy out. So, first thing is as I'm getting jostled around a little bit and I'm just moving the controls barely and I'm feeling things that I've never felt before. You know what I mean? I've flown planes, you know what I mean? And they've given me the stick up there and, hey, go have fun, do this, you know what I mean? And I've done that. That's very different from a helicopter. I almost feel like things are like amplified, you know what I mean? Those little tiny movements, And
they are.
With the wind blowing and everything. And I don't know what the threshold of an oh shit moment is. You know what I mean? The guy next to me does, and he's just completely calm and cool and everything. So I'm like, I guess I'm doing good. But the whole time it was just like, trying really hard not to yank and bank and do anything that I've done in DCS, because, the only thing that helped me was the fact that I've flown sims over the years and I know that I don't need to make large movements, and I've always fine-tuned my stuff in my sims to not have to move the stick much, and that helped me. But man, the environment around you is what we're totally missing more than anything. And I think having that helps you fly better because you feel the limitations against you. You know what I mean?
The external impacts on the aircraft, particularly in a hover, cannot be overstated. Like and I've flown Cessnas that they weigh less than any helicopter I've ever flown, and you just don't feel that impact. You just take off, and you got some crosswind or whatever, but you're fine. But a helicopter, if you're hovering that thing and you get a crosswind, Yeah, I mean, depending on the strength of it, it's affecting you, and you're constantly making minute changes and movements. When we learned how to hover in flight school, this was a process that took days and days and days, and they would feed it to you in these very small increments. I mean, the first time that I controlled the aircraft at a hover, I had this old Vietnam vet. He'd been in all kinds of stuff, so nothing scared him. These guys had seen it
Oh
all.
yeah.
Particularly with the students coming through, they've been in every kind of scary situation imaginable. But he would be like, "Okay, you have control of the pedals. I'll control everything else. Point us at that tree and keep us pointed at that tree." Well, 2 minutes later, your head is 90 degrees. You're looking straight at that tree, but the aircraft's pointing 90 degrees away. It's just hard to control your feet to that level, and then later they're like, okay, well, now we're gonna let you control the collective and I'll hold the cyclic, or vice versa. And I will tell you, the day that I actually hovered and was stable, my instructor, we were waiting to cross an active, and he looked up and he sees this other aircraft coming in and doing auto rotation, and we're waiting to get clearance, and he's like, oh, look at this guy, he's all screwed up. And I looked up, we're wobbling around and all this stuff, and I look up, and now I'm not thinking about hovering. I'm just watching this other aircraft fly, and all of a sudden the aircraft just hovered. It was fine. And he says, and he stops and he looks and he goes, "Look, you're doing it. You're hovering." And I immediately started wobbling.
Start wobbling. Yeah.
Because you start thinking about it.
You start thinking about it.
And it's just like riding a bike, right? I mean, that's what it honestly feels like. You're trying to hover. People talk about you're trying to sit on a unicycle or something. That's kind of what it is. And so I don't shed too many tears when I hear people talk about my DCS helicopter module doesn't feel right, because I'm like, dude, you have no idea how much it doesn't feel right, and it never will feel right because you can't replicate that. I took off an Cessna the very first time and it was no problem. I landed in a Cessna the very first time. It was no problem because an airplane wants to fly. A helicopter wants to beat itself to death against the ground with you in it.
Exactly. And flying a helicopter is more like being a drummer. You know what I mean?
It is.
Or the old rubbing your head and patting your belly at the same time, because you've got to be doing different things with different parts. You know what I mean?
And the Gazelle's worse because the rotor goes the opposite direction. That took me like 2 hours before I realized why I was doing things wrong. I was like, oh, wait. The rotor spins the entirely different direction.
I never knew that.
Right pedal, not left pedal. Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, that's why my first takeoff was abysmal, because I'm used to putting in left pedal and making it worse. Yep.
I never thought of that. I know I had to counter the torque until you get so much speed. You know what I mean? But I never thought about which pedal I was using. I guess.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Yeah, I thought the Gazelle was pretty cool. I didn't have much issue with it, to be honest. But yeah, flying a helicopter is different. Yeah.
It's a light aircraft too. I mean, it's lighter than a Kiowa, and I mean the Kiowa you get a strong wind or something, you're going to get blown around. So I can only imagine how that Gazelle feels. So yeah, it's a little squirrely, and I think part of that is the flight model. The PC has already acknowledged that there are issues with it, and they're looking to fix that once they get the Kiowa lined up. Like they're basically using the information they learned while doing the Kiowa to go back and kind of clean up the Gazelle. But at the same time, I think people don't understand how squirrely a little aircraft like that can be, but they also don't understand how advanced some of these systems in these helicopters are. Now, I know the Gazelle's got some augmentation. I will tell you, an Apache helicopter, if you put that bad boy on hover hold mode, she ain't moving. Like, it is. The first time I saw one actually hovering in hold mode, which you could take your hands off the controls and just sit there, it was hovering at like 100 feet. And it was like the Earth was moving and that helicopter was just staying in orbit around it. Like nothing was causing it to even twitch. It was just locked in tight. So there are some really advanced systems out there. And I don't know exactly what the Gazelle has, but the idea that, well, it flies like it's on rails, well, maybe it does. Because I can tell you could argue that the Apache flies like it's on rails at times. So, just temper your frustrations over what you think things should fly like, and maybe just accept that at the end of the day, it probably doesn't feel like a real Gazelle, but it probably feels closer than you think. I don't know.
Right.
I could be wrong.
So talking about the Kiowa in real life, I think a lot of people don't really know a lot about this helicopter, to be honest. Like I didn't know it even existed until back in the day when Janes came out with it in Longbow 2. You know what I mean? And to me, it always looked like, what was the helicopter it looked like? Wasn't it like a something 500, a Bell 500 or something?
It's
or a Jet Ranger.
It's basically a Jet Ranger. It's I always screw this up. A 406. No, 407. There's Bell 206, and then there's Bell 407, which is the longer fuselage. So it's essentially that's just been militarized. Um, yeah, I will tell you, I'm surprised honestly at how many people do know about the Kiowa within the simulation community. Because as a Kiowa pilot growing up, you always had this conversation. You meet someone, they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I fly helicopters in the Army." "Oh, that's cool. What do you fly?" "I fly Kiowas." And it's a blank stare and a pause. "Well, which one is that?"
Yeah,
And
they
we always
expect
say,
you to
"Well,
say Black Hawk or Apache, right?
right." And so we'd always say, "Well, we're the ones with the balls," because you got the giant ball
Ha.
up top. But people don't know what it is, and I mean, it was an absolute workhorse. Very simple to maintain compared to other aircraft. Very easy to get around. I was in the 82nd Airborne, so everybody who knows anything about the 82nd knows that they're the global reaction force, right? The president dials 911 and the phone at the 82nd rings. And so we had our aircraft there that were specially modified to fit into C-130s, and you could jam two of these aircraft in the back of a C-130, and we would practice this all the time. And C-130 lands on some austere airfield that just got seized. You push those puppies out of the back, and 20 minutes later, you've got two aircraft on station. And so that was the kind of things that we brought to the fight. Now, the Kiowa was not built necessarily to do the things that we've been doing for the past forever. It was originally conceived as a artillery spotter, unarmed, and then over time, due to some other sort of operations that were going on around the Persian Gulf, they started arming them almost as like a test bed. And the thing that's interesting about the Kiowa is it sort of gave birth to a lot of the technology that all the other aircraft get to use. It was the first Army helicopter with a glass cockpit. Its weapons systems sort of led to some of the initial or follow-up design with the Apache. Some of the navigation systems are still sort of the genesis that other ones use. I mean, hell, we had capabilities in the 58 that when I went to Apaches in 2015, I was like, man, this is crap compared to what we had in the Kiowa. There's certain things. So it was a really awesome aircraft, but it was not popular outside of both the Kiowa community and outside of like the infantrymen, right? The guy on the ground who I can't tell you how many times when I was teaching at the infantry school, I would have students and they would find out that I flew Kiowas, and they would just tell me these stories like, "Oh man, you guys were awesome. You did this one thing this one time, and you saved my life, or did that and the other." And so they kind of had this almost like cult following. And so when I found out that DCS was getting a Kiowa module, my first thought was, what? Like, do people even know what the hell they're talking about? Like, do they even know what they're asking for? Because if you did fly it in Jane's, you knew that it had like, a few rounds of, a few rockets and a couple hundred rounds of 50, and that's it. So, but I think it's going to be interesting in DCS because that laser. I think that's what's going to bring a lot of boys to the yard is going to be the fact that it's got a laser designator, and that's something that we're sorely lacking.
Well, not only that, but the tech has changed since Jane's too. Like you just pointed out, back then it wasn't really made for doing much in the combat role. It was like advanced recon or something, as I recall, back in Jane's, and it had the bulb up top so you could like pass off targets to the Apache or something, as I recall. What I mean?
And since you couldn't really play multiplayer back then, or depending on the game, I think in DCS the multiplayer environment it's going to be huge. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be so much fun because you are going to have those guys that want to they don't necessarily want to shoot stuff. They want to call in A10s. They want to call in F-18s on targets. And so I think from a single player aspect, the helicopter is going to be okay, interesting. But on the multiplayer stage, I think it's going to be a game changer. It's going to be awesome to watch. And just as a guy who grew up flying these aircraft, like I'm tickled that people actually care enough about it, that there's so many people that are just anxious to fly it, and again, just from a guy who had to describe physically what my aircraft looked like so people knew what the hell I did. It's a breath of fresh air,
Yeah, it's definitely a cool looking chopper for sure. I always dug it, but again, I didn't know what it was until Jane's Longbow 2 came along, and then I heard they were doing it, and I'm like, oh man, this could be cool. And there's rumor for the longest time, and even in the interview that Wags did with me back, I don't know how long ago it was, but I had asked, what would be the module you would create if money was no object, and you could just do it that hasn't been done, and he said the Apache.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of rumor that that's what's going on in the background, and I sure hope they're right, because man, with that in the game with the Kiowa, like that would just be
Yeah.
awesome. That would be like and like you were talking about before, the era. What era are they going for? They're all over the
Right.
place. But if they were to
Yeah.
concentrate Cold War, and maybe as far as
Hmm.
go from Cold War to Persian Gulf, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and maybe just a little bit beyond that. Don't go out of the 90s, you know.
I mean, even early OIF, I'm fine with that. But we're getting to the part where things are just a little bit too advanced, and I think we're going to take the fun out of it. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, the Apache. I've heard the same rumors. I guess my question is which model,
Right.
because you've got the old A model, which honestly I don't have really any interest in flying. It is not nearly as good as a Delta model. The FLIR on it was not as good. I talked to guys. I never flew an A model, but I talked to guys who did, and then they went to Deltas, and they were like, "Oh my god, it was so much better. You could see so much better. It was, just the A model was very, it was steam gauges, old FLIR. I don't even think it had GPS. I think it was all INS, at least initially.
But if you couldn't
Um,
have the D model, you know what I mean? Would you take the
yeah, I
A?
mean, sure. I
I
mean, I'm
totally
not gonna.
would. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
Well, it's a step, right? It's a step in the right direction,
yeah.
because if you can get that,
Well, if
then
you've
then
got
you
the
can
A,
bring
then
along the
how
D.
hard would it be to make the D or E, right? Like it would just be
Yeah,
add longbow radar, add the whiz bang tech
yeah,
in the cockpit, and now you've got it.
yeah.
But
No,
that's what I
I'm
would
not going to
love.
say no to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would love more than anything. But I'm definitely looking forward to the Kiowa too. So the difference, though, is what they're doing is a more modern version, isn't it? Or what you can say. I'm not going to get you in trouble here, but what can you say?
No,
I guess.
it is. Let's say that it's more modern than what I remember. When I left flying Kiowas and I went to teach, it went through a couple of upgrades. In fact, they were getting those upgrades when I left. So, for instance, I never flew a Kiowa that had a flare dispenser, and then they got those installed as I was leaving. I never flew a Kiowa that could talk to a UAV, and share video footage that way. So there's new sort of tech that came along, and that's kind of what they're replicating. So the pinnacle of the Kiowa from a technology standpoint, and then of course, I believe it's also going to have the APKWS, which the Kiowa didn't even have, but it would have, it would have had. So it's going to have that capability. So, but yeah, it's going to have all the bells and whistles from what I understand.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that. I was bummed, like, was it about a week ago, that they had announced they had ran into some snags because Eagle Dynamics had changed some code again and it messed up some things for their beta process. So I
Yeah,
was really bummed. And
yeah,
a lot of people was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what they said." But then, like last week or later, at the end of last week, I'd reported in the news that they said they were getting back on track. That it was only going to be a couple days. You know what I mean, to
yeah,
fix all the things. And that's kind of the bummer of the whole DCS infrastructure, I guess, is as they create and fix and make the engine better in the
yeah,
world, they tend to break things, and then the developers have to turn around and go and fix that, and that's got to be a bummer for the small guy. Like
yeah,
there's some guys I've interviewed, like Greg at Reflected Simulation, super great dude that makes
yeah,
campaigns and
yeah.
stuff, and like
Hmm.
I had his campaign for the Saber, and I started to look at it and make a video, and I just did my open beta update, and I was trying to take off, and I took off, and I'm looking down below, and all the other Sabers are running into each other on fire, and I'm going, what the hell? And he's like,
Yep.
"Oh man, that's a thing they did." And I had to, he had to wait for them to fix that, And it's like
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that can happen. But then the other side of that is he has to upgrade his missions to be compatible with things that they do as well. So, the hard
Yep.
thing, I think it's almost a hardship for a third-party developer in this system is that, if they want, to keep their customers happy, they've got to go back and fix something that's already been paid for a long time ago that they might,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're on the fifth or sixth iteration of whatever they're doing now, and then they got to go back and fix something that is 3 years old or something. So that's kind of the
Hmm.
mega bummer.
Yeah. I think it's certainly, just the little bit that I see behind the curtain with the way the Polychop and ED interact is that is a certain challenge, and they communicate and all that stuff. But you're right, it's whack-a-mole in the software level, and no one really knows what fixing X is going to do to Y. And so, yeah, I can see it being very frustrating for the third-party guys who just, they wake up one day and suddenly this widget doesn't work. It's like, well, I just fixed that, So it is going to slow down things. Everyone always asks me, when's it coming out? I don't know. I have no idea. But I know that they're putting in a lot of effort right now with the flight model, and Brundis and I and a couple other guys are constantly, testing out certain things. But it's hard work. I don't think anyone, because I certainly didn't, I don't think anyone fully appreciates and understands how difficult it is. Again, going back to helicopters, for these guys to come up with this stuff and build it where it works, because it's as simple as, especially with helicopters, it's as simple as if you get over a certain airspeed, a helicopter flies very differently than it did 30 seconds ago when you were a little bit slower.
Well, that goes back to like the Gazelle even. I'm taking off. You got to give it so much torque with the pedals there to keep it from, sliding side to side. But then once you pick up so much forward momentum, then everything's different, and you can slowly let off of that pedal, and it's going to handle differently. And then it's going to probably lose its shit a little bit more at that lower speed too. Now you're going to have to go back to that pedal again.
Yeah, and so trying to build that into a system where it makes sense is incredibly difficult. So I just when it comes to those conversations, I just ask people to just be patient and just understand that it's harder than you think it is, because it's harder than I thought it was.
Oh, I totally get it. Like I said, I've been around, and close to developers, back in the 90s and in the early 2000s when it came to flight sims. And I think the problem and why we don't have as many sims as we had before, and why the flight sim, genre died, was that it costs a lot more money to create a flight simulation that's realistic than it does a AAA game usually. And like I said, Falcon 4.0 was the straw that broke the camel's back because of how much development time and effort and money it took. And then at the same time, I think the consoles came out harder, you know what I mean, around that time in the early 2000s. And it was easier, and you could develop 4 great games and make money on them versus what it would cost you to make one flight sim. And the time and effort that goes into it, like we were saying earlier, you're not just simulating a flight model. You're simulating an environment. You're simulating a weather system. You're simulating ballistics. You're simulating a laser. You're simulating how the ordnance can impact something. You're simulating how the thing that gets impacted gets impacted.
Yeah.
So, and
and you're simulating the technology that's happening behind the scenes of all that stuff.
That's pulling it off, exactly. So it's a lot bigger picture than what most people realize. And again, that's why that's why we need to do everything that we can as the voices of the simulation community to further this and get more people into it, because the more people that buy the stuff, you know what I mean, the better off we're going to be, and it keeps our market a little bit more stable, I guess, too. But it's definitely a different world, and that's why we have only the guys that we have doing what they're doing at this point. So the other thing I noticed is that I saw an interview with you and Baltic, which was pretty cool. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I've been meaning to. But you know how that goes, man, with the whole week.
Oh yeah.
But what I do. What I saw was really cool. So what can you tell us about that?
I mean, honestly, like, that completely caught me by surprise. Like, when he asked me about working on the campaign, that was not a pre-discussed thing at all. And honestly, the conversation really hasn't gone beyond that, other than, this is kind of long-term. Hey, would you like to work with me if, when the Kiowa comes out and when I'm in a position to be able to make a campaign, would you be willing to work with me? And yes, of course, that'd be a lot of fun. So beyond that, there really isn't anything to talk about with it. I look forward to working with them. And, I think it's great that guys like, I've talked to Greg, like you mentioned as well. And,
he's a great guy
Dragon.
Too. Yeah. I've never talked to Baltic,
cool.
but Greg's a great guy too. Yeah.
Yeah. He had me, I did some voiceover work for him on, gosh, his P-47 campaign that's coming out here in a little while.
I feel bad. I was going to do some for him. He asked me to, and I said yes at first, and then I just didn't have the time, man. And I'm like, I really wanted to do that because he's such a nice guy, you know what I mean? And he's very passionate about what he does, you know?
Yeah. But you know, it's great to have those dudes because they're breathing extra life into these things. And so, you know, I think the Kiowas and all the modules that get this sort of love from other third parties is it just breathes extra life into it, makes it that much better and more immersive for people. Because there's so many. I didn't really realize until I started paying attention here how many people don't actually play any multiplayer whatsoever.
Yes, I'm one of them.
And I get it. Like, you know, some of the servers are just they're just toxic, right? I mean, you just log in and like some dude's like taking off on the taxiway and shooting his buddies and stuff. Like that's why like our server for low level hell is not open to the public. Like you have to be a member of our Discord. It doesn't cost you anything. You're not expected to pay, but it is a way for me to say, oh, okay, you know, douchebag 5'9" always gets on and shoots everyone on his own side. Well, guess what? You're no longer allowed, right? We're not going to let you in there anymore. And that's the only reason we do it, to make a healthier multiplayer environment. But there's so many people that don't do it. Either they can't because their computer's not very good, or, you know, whatever the case may be, or they just don't want to deal with that crap. And so these campaigns are important because you can only build your own mission so many times before well, I already know where everything is, you know. And it takes a lot of work, honestly.
And I think that these guys are needed more than any, at least within the DCS community. And that is because, unfortunately, and this isn't another jab at Ed, but it is in a way, is that they don't really provide much usually. You know, and that's part of the experience that we're missing, you know what I mean, that we used to have back in the day from a box product. Is you bought a box product, you had X number of single player missions, you had a campaign, and then you can go online and further it with the end game and the multiplayer arena, you know what I mean? And these days, man, that's the one thing when I do a first impressions video of any new module or even the stuff from IL2, you know what I mean? Like I go through and I go, well, you know what? Wow, there isn't much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always one of the check boxes I'm looking for. And then there are other times, like when they came out with the Syria map, you know what I mean? The guys at Heatblur came out with a bunch of F-14 missions, and I was tickled pink. You know, I was like, oh my god, this is so awesome, you know?
It's a two-edged sword, though, right? Because, as we've talked about a bunch here, is the technology and the time required to make these simulators the way that they are, as advanced they are. Like, where do you put the resources into also creating campaigns? So it's almost like, look, which do you want? Do you want it as high fidelity as we can get it? Or do you want it lower fidelity, but also with some campaigns? Because you can't get both, right? I don't have the resources, the time, the people to do both. And so, you know, I don't know how big ED is, and I don't know their kind of manpower, you know, challenges or what have you. But, you know, it's one of those things where I'm willing to accept that you are creating an open world sandbox type situation that has these really high fidelity aircraft that I can play around with, and I'm willing to put in the time to build my own stuff, or I'm willing to work with others and create, and I'm willing to spend a little money to get these campaigns from somebody else. And it's a great opportunity for those guys who are really good at mission editing to make a little scratch on the side and do something cool, you know.
That is a plus, I'll say that. And the only thing in their defense that I'll say is that, you know, the good thing is the campaigns aren't that expensive. You know, you're talking
they're not.
10 or 12 bucks, and then when they're on sale, most of them are like $3 to $5 or something. So, but again,
that's a lot of work that goes into those. I mean, that's, you know, like when I was talking to Baltic Dragon, he was saying, you know, it takes them like 8 or 9 months, I want to say.
From start to finish.
And I don't doubt it. You know, and Greg, but I mean, I did those voiceovers months ago at this point, and I know he's still got a ways to go on that campaign. So there's a lot of work that goes into those, and they're not expensive.
But I would just think by now that they would like hire somebody on. You know what I mean? To be the guy, and like, you know what I mean? Like, they got enough of their own products. You know what I mean? To do that.
I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm willing to bet they get a little bit of kickback from the third party campaigns.
Oh, they have to. So, you know, that was a question I had asked. I think I'd asked Greg, and he's like, I can't talk about that. So I get it. I'm sure they're making something on it. You know. I'm
sure they. And so from their standpoint, it's like they're subcontracting, right? It's like we don't have to worry about it. And then maybe even it's a little bit of deniability if it's not very good. They're like, well, I mean, that's third party. It's not us, you know? So, I think they probably just lean on that. And I don't blame them. I would too.
So in terms of online content, uh,
Hmm.
you have your own thing going on over there with IL2.
Really love flying Circus, so I've been doing an online campaign, which nobody watches, and it's fine. I just do it for fun. But we actually just had Wolfpack 345 play with us last Wednesday, and I think he's going to join us again. So it's cool to it's cool to talk to those guys, because when I started this channel, there's a couple dudes that like I would watch their stuff and like really enjoy it, and he was one of those guys. It was like I just really enjoyed his content. And so
He
it
seems
was
like
really
a
cool.
nice guy too. I've
He
highlighted his
is.
stuff in the Flight Sim News before, and I've watched some of his videos. He's definitely a nice guy for sure.
He is super nice. Like I sent him a note just out of nowhere, and I'm like, hey, man, this is me. It's like, hey, I'd like to talk to you sometime. And he just came back, and we just had a little chat for like 5 or 10 minutes, and talking. And I sent him an invite to my Discord just to be courteous, And I told him, I said, look, you're not expected to join or anything. I'm just being nice. And he joined, and then he saw that we were doing a World War One thing. I was like, hey, if you want to fly, and he's like, yeah, no, totally cool. In fact, he was talking about DCS today, and I said, hey, when you're ready to fly helicopters, let me know. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been watching your stuff. I'm actually interested. I'm like, dude, this guy's got like a bajillion subscribers and all this content. And
Yep.
What do you mean you watched my stuff?
Exactly. There's a lot of nice
yeah,
guys
he's
out
very
there.
genuine.
I think that's the
Yeah,
cool thing
yeah,
about this community in general, and that's why I like to do what I do as well. Is there's a lot of guys out there that have heart, and that are out there kind of for the same reasons we are, which is to kind of further the community and uh,
yeah.
help ensure longevity for flight sims. And there's a lot of cool people I've met. There's a couple other guys out there, like Chad Flies is pretty cool. Ian Christie does some pretty good stuff.
Hmm.
And they've communicated with me in the background. A lot of people aren't
Yeah,
afraid to say hi. And I think that's pretty cool.
yeah.
That I think is
Everyone I've
is the
sent a note
bonus.
to, yeah, everyone that I've sent a note to be like, hey, would you be willing to have a chat? I sent a note to Tactical Pascal like 2 weeks ago, and we started chatting, and we're gonna have a conversation here in the next couple of weeks. Um, you know, yeah, I think, and that's kind of what caused me to create my channel. Was I wanted to build a sense of community, because you mentioned the Fighter Pilot podcast earlier, and the first time I heard of that, I think it's very cool. I let me just say that, but my initial gut reaction was, what the hell? And the reason I say that is because as a helicopter guy, all you see is people, fawning over jets and all this stuff. And you're like, hey, you know what? Helicopters are cool too. And so it was one of the things that kind of spurred me to make this channel, was not so much to just show DCS content, but was to build a community around helicopters in some of the same fashion that I was seeing being done with the fast moving guys. And it's taken off. Like I'm really surprised. I started my channel 5 months ago, I think, almost 5 months ago to the day. And I've got my Discord, which has got 500 some odd people in it. I've got whatever 1,300, I guess, subscribers at this point. And it's small potatoes, but from a guy who 5 months ago didn't have a channel and was like, I'll probably get 100 people maybe to watch my stuff. It's pretty impressive to me that there's that much a sense for wanting the community, and that's what I see, is a lot of people that want to have that relationship with people, and it's good to see people interested in helicopters, and that's really what I wanted to do with the channel. And we're expanding some things here pretty soon, to kind of widen that net, so it's pretty exciting.
You should definitely talk with Sergio too. He's another
Yeah.
guy that is very approachable, and I'm sure he would love to talk with you as well. He's a real nice guy. I've talked to him in the background here and there. He runs Helisimmer, and like I said,
Yeah. Okay.
he's doing stuff for micro pros, the new micro pros again. Man, I fucked that up last week. I said like Microsoft instead of micro pros or something, and it's
Right.
so
Yeah.
easy to
Yeah.
do. But
Doesn't roll off the tongue like it used to.
no, exactly. But he's another super nice guy, and I think that's the one thing that I've enjoyed most out of this. There are moments when you do this stuff and you get frustrated, like some of the stuff I dealt with earlier in the week on my Flight Sim News, and you know what I mean. Some of the stuff you deal with in the background from time to time, because what people don't realize is even though we do this for fun, it can be work sometimes, and it can be frustrating. But I think the
Oh yeah.
most rewarding moments is when I can sit back and talk to people like you. You know what I mean? Or somebody like Chad Flies, sends me an email that he tried helping me out in some way or another in the background with something that's going on. You know what I mean? Like, you don't expect that, but when it happens, it really makes it rewarding. And I think it helps us build that community and goes to show that, we're not all like the Reddit crew, you know what I mean, when it comes to, being flight simmers. Only thing we really want back out of this is to be able to have a flight sim to play in 10 years. You know what I mean? And to have better flight sims to play in 10 years is what it comes down to. But it's definitely been fun. Mine's been about a year and a half, I think, at this point. And again, I'm nowhere near, I think I got like 2,700 or something like that. And, you're going to have spikes, you know what I mean? 1 month you'll get 500 subs and you're like, woohoo! You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll be at 5,000 in no time. And then, now it's
screeching halt.
Yes.
Well, it's so funny. Like, I still don't know what I'm doing, right? So I'll look at my numbers, and just like a week ago, I was looking at my numbers and they hadn't really changed at all. And I was like, well, this is it. Like, I've hit the wall. And then 3 days later, it's up by like 100.
Yeah.
And
you'll have that.
And it happens over and over and over again. And I'm always like, well, this is it. This is the end of the growth. This is where I'm going to be. And then you look at, those guys that have been around for 5, 6, 7 years, and they've got these massive channels. And, and YouTube is a strange beast, with the strange mathematics that go on in the background of what gets played and what gets suggested and stuff. So at the end of the day, it's just fun. I enjoy doing it. The day that I stop enjoying it is the day I just stop doing it. Like I don't need to do it, but I really enjoy the community that has been built up around it. And, for me, I love putting out a video. Like we talked about the Black Shark video. So many people reach out and like, I flew the Black Shark again after watching your video, and now it makes sense. Or even the Gazelle. I mean, oh my God. Again, that Gazelle video, I totally expected to just get heat rounds in the face all day long. And so many people were like, dude, I picked up the Gazelle again, and I made the corrections that you talked about, which came from real Gazelle pilots. And it flies so much better now, and I love flying it, and this and that and the other. And so for me, that's rewarding. It's worth that guy who consistently down thumbs every video I do. Like it's like every video, like clockwork, I just get at least initially a down thumb, and it's like I could just picture this one dude that just a ball of hate that just doesn't like me for whatever reason.
Oh, I've got a bunch of those, dude. Believe me, I'm very opinionated. There's a whole crew on Reddit that can't stand me because I posted my videos there, and I stood up whenever they, I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut, I guess, but we all have our own characters, I guess, and that's mine, but I think my problem is I'm the same way in person as I am online. And I've never been that guy to be in the background that was like cowering down to anybody, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I'm the same way in real life, so it's gotten me in trouble over the years, I'll say that. But at the same time, like what you're talking about, I find it amusing sometimes what some people don't like, you know what I mean? Or I get in trouble by saying so. Like the one thing I think that really sparked a lot of comments on a couple recent videos was when I was like, why are they making another trainer for DCS? And I'm like, I don't get it, you know what I mean? Like I've already tried the Avio Jet and some of the other ones when they were free play, and I'm like, why would you even pay for that? You know what I mean? What do you even need that for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just another one of those is not something somebody needs, I think. But that's my opinion. Other people love those things to death, And
well, there's those guys who live and breathe some of those odd aircraft that, like there's aircraft that developers are making I've never even heard of. And I'm like, like I've never heard of this, what is it, electric jet or something? I don't remember what it's called. It's like with the two engines on top of one another. I think Razbam is doing it maybe.
Oh yeah. It was like a British thing.
Yeah, I never like.
I guarantee we're going to get comments on this comment right here. They're going to be like, blah blah blah. Don't you know what the hell that is? You played flight sims for 3 decades and you don't know what the hell the blah 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 is? That's what I'm saying. That's exactly the stuff you get. I think that's the funniest part of this. You know what I mean? Because you can't know everything. I have been doing this 3 decades, but I can't remember everything I did 10 minutes ago. You know, so there's always going to be that.
Maybe I've seen this thing in a magazine, but I don't remember it, and everyone's really excited about it. And another friend of mine, we were talking about it. We're like, we've never heard of this jet. Why is everyone so excited about it? Like, how long were we asleep? But,
Dude, I went to recently. I went to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio again. I've been there a few times over the years, but recently I went there on my vacation with my girlfriend when we really had time to walk around. And I'll tell you what, man, if you're into aviation and you dig that kind of thing, it's worth the trip. You know, we spent probably 5 hours there walking around, and man, I saw so many things there that I didn't even remember existed. You know what I mean? The aviation history is so thick, man. There's so many planes, so many cool looking things from like the Cold War era too. So many like pointy, super sharp pointed, super aerodynamic. Like all the 100 series aircraft. Just so much
I mean,
good
if you
stuff.
look back through the time of like the 50s, 60s, there's so many different airplanes that just came out almost like a gag. They're like, this weird looking thing that didn't last.
Like it might have flown 5 times, you know what I mean, or something like that. But and I even said that when I made a video on it. I'm like, like this thing probably, I don't know, how long did this thing even last? I don't remember seeing this.
Yeah.
Just so many different things. But you can't be everything to everybody, I guess, is what it comes down to.
No, and I learned that when I was teaching. I remember my first teaching a course. There was these students I just couldn't get through, and I spent so much time focusing on them that I left everyone else behind. And I realized that, and so I've kind of taken this worldview of like, look, I'm just going to try and put out the information that I can, and hopefully it's of value to you. If there's some sort of mental block going on with you where you just don't want to listen, well, that's on you. I'm not going to try to bend over backwards to reach you. I'm still going to be nice. I'm going to be courteous. But it's up to you whether you want to watch my stuff or whether you care about it or not. But I don't know. It's funny. YouTube's an interesting beast. Just the community in general. But it's been generally, 99% positive. So I've enjoyed it.
So when it comes down to what you got going on online in terms of multiplayer stuff, is that low-level hell?
Yeah, so if I play online anymore, it's either I'm doing it on our server or I'm doing something specific with people. Like sometimes I will grab a few guys that I kind of know and trust and say, hey, look, let's do a video. I'm going to build a scenario and we're going to do this scenario and film it to kind of show some things. Or I do these occasional community events. We're about to do one here in about 2 weeks, where I try to get as many people involved as possible, and I just build, not an overly complex, but a large mission where there's a lot going on. And so our most recent one was the Apocalypse Meow, we called it, which was an Apocalypse Now type situation where we had like 30 Hueys. It was like all Hueys, and we had some F5s for CAS, and they were just doing this massive air assault, there was nothing complex about it. It was just this chance to get how many Hueys could you get up in the air. And given my background, I try to add a little bit of realism to it. Not too much, not go over the top. We don't need to sit here and brief and rehearse for 5 hours and things like that. But there's enough realism within the plan and within how we operate that the guys can have that little bit of immersion factor. And so the next one that we're doing is going to be a little bit more complex. Just because I'm running out of ideas that don't involve complexity. But I don't I don't go on to any of the other servers, not because I just don't have the time. It's to the point now where if I'm playing, I'm probably recording it.
That's same here, man.
Something.
That's same here, dude.
And it's a curse. I mean, every now and then I will say, nope, I'm not recording. I'm just going to play. I'm just going to have fun. But yeah, so our server, if I can pitch my stuff here, is
sure, go for it. That's why I asked.
Level,
yeah,
our low-level health server is, again, you got to be a member, and that's just to avoid douchebaggery. But I'm working with a guy. It goes by Thread. He's down in Australia, and he's a great mission editor. And in fact, I just announced the other day, 2 days ago, I think. I'm going to give him a copy of the Kiowa when it comes out, my treat, because he's just put so much work into creating this server. And so what we do occasionally is, we'll get on Discord and talk, or we're constantly chatting, and we're sort of building it where it's somewhat realistic, but it's still plug and play. You can just jump in and have fun. In fact, today I was working on a bunch of graphics for a map, so that somebody can log in and not have to read a bunch of crap. Because that's the problem. Most guys, when they log into these servers, they're not reading anything that's going on. They just want to log in, and they want to go fly and kill stuff. And I appreciate that. So we're trying to make it more visual, where it's like, okay, where the hell am I? Where are the bad guys? Okay, there's red arrows over there. Okay, bad guys are moving that way. Got it. That's where I'm going. And so you get this sort of mixture of guys who are, it's all co-op. It's versus the environment. So you don't have this weird sort of, you're worried about some guy flying an enemy F-18 and whose radar is who and all this crap. It is against the environment, and it's somewhat realistic. And there's a lot of guys on my Discord who have military experience. In fact, the video that came out today, I was flying with a guy who flew for the Australian Defense Force and another guy who was an American infantryman. So, we were talking the talk in a lot of ways and working together, and people gravitate towards that. And so a lot of the people that jump on there, they want to fly with us, just because they do get that little extra immersion and they pick up these little tips and tricks. So that's pretty much my total multiplayer experience for DCS. And then, of course, with IL2, we're doing that campaign, and I think we're going to wrap it up here soon, and we might do something in the World War II genre. I'm just not sure yet.
IL2 is so much fun. I really love it.
It is.
I love the planes in DCS as well, some of the warbirds, but man, I just think it's so much more fun in IL2.
I just hate
they have
multiplayer
it together.
in IL2. I cannot log into a server because I'm just cannon fodder for everyone.
No, same here, dude. I don't see that well, you know what I mean? And like, I don't understand how you visually, like, some people are like, oh, you turn labels on and you're lame. No, I'm 50.
Right.
I want to have fun and find the stuff. Is it cheating? I don't think so, or it wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I'm a ground attack guy. Like, as much as I'd love to be a fighter pilot, as much as any other kid, but like, my dogfighting skills are turn left or turn right.
Dude,
like I don't know all this other stuff, but I can shoot the hell out of some tanks on the ground. So
I am the same way, dude. I love to ground pound, you know what I mean? But I am not a tactician when it comes to dogfighting. If I could keep it in the air long enough to not fall out of the sky and shoot something, I've done really good.
Yeah.
So you seem like a real busy guy, Brian. What kind of other stuff do you have going on?
Well, we are in the midst of really sort of, I guess you could say, solidifying this community that we've built with Low Level Hell. So we're working with some guys who work with me behind the scenes on the Discord. We've been chatting about setting up a podcast. So October 14th, we're going to go live. In fact, we're going to record it here in the next couple of days. And so it's not really like a fighter pilot podcast type situation. It's sort of a mix between a gaming conversation, but also real life. And to kind of give you an example, so our first episode, Burundus, who again is a friend of the channel, and people have gravitated towards some of his videos about the Kiowa. He worked on the Army getting the APKWS laser guided rockets. So he has intimate knowledge of how they work, the science behind it, the process of how they became, in the inventory. And so we're sort of having this discussion about the actual rocket and its use in DCS. I've talked to Wolfpack to talk to him in the future, Tactical Pascal. So we've got some people lined up both from the gaming side and then from the real world side. So I know a guy that taught me how to fly Echo Model Apaches. He's in the Combat Aviation Hall of Fame, has been in some very serious battles, essentially, early on in the Iraq War. Like one of those dudes who's has been flying Apaches forever and a day. I've talked to him. He's willing to come on and chat. So we're just going to have sort of this mixed bag of people over time. But we're starting that up October 14th. Hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll go live on that. We just had a contest, actually, for the Discord. I wanted to build like a patch, some sort of emblem for the community to something cool, but also kind of reach back to some lineage, because Low Level Hell refers to a book. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
I've heard of Low Level Hell before, so that's why when I first saw that in your email there, I'm like, that sounds really familiar. Yeah. Why does that sound so familiar?
Yeah. You kind of hear guys, it's kind of like the Scout Pilot Bible. It's about it's from this guy's essentially memoirs, Hugh Mills, talking about his time in Vietnam, flying loaches and stuff. And there's some really interesting stories. A really good book. But that was kind of like the book that Kiowa guys knew about the most, I guess you could say. And so when I built the community, I was like, well, what do I call this thing? I don't want to call it Casmo's Discord or something stupid. And then it just kind of popped in my head, and I was like, yeah, okay, it's cool. So it's a patch that, it has that. And what I did was I took the patch from the original unit from that guy who wrote that book, and I gave it to some people, and I said, look, I want a new patch. This is sort of the genesis. I want it to, represent this, but obviously don't just copy it. And I'll give you a Kiowa if you win. And so I had several people put in some really great patch designs, but one guy just blew it out of the water. It was awesome. I just posted that video on Sunday. So he's getting a free Kiowa. And so we're going to I've already had people ask, like, hey, can I get this with a shirt on it? Can I get a patch of this? So we're looking at opening a little online store and trying to, we want to make money, but we want to make money for the community, right? So it's like I always tell people, I'm not putting food on my kids' plate with the money I make from YouTube and any of this other stuff. I've got a Patreon page. We are going to have this online store, and all of this is for the community, so that I can turn around and say, hey, I want to have, this for the community. Here's a prize, or we can just do a random raffle or things like that. So that's really what we're trying to do. And then one thing I guess I could also mention here in December, and I'm still kind of laying the groundwork for it, is we're going to do some sort of charity event. I've got some ideas how I want to do it. It's not going to be like a live stream. I know that's kind of popular, but I'm looking at doing it a little bit differently. But I had a good friend of mine that died in a midair collision in a Kiowa back in 2011. And his wife, he was just a heart of gold on this dude. Like I can't express to you what a good guy this was. And his wife, and kind of in his memory, his widow had created this thing they call Franksgiving, and she does this charity every year, and the money goes to different things. Kind of depends on the year. And I just talked to her recently, and I said, I have a voice now. Like there's people that actually listen when I talk about things. And I want to use it for good. So we're going to have some sort of community event as a fundraiser in support of that. And I thought that was pretty appropriate. And it kind of leads me to a segue. And I want to tell the story because this is kind of interesting. I was talking about this Franksgiving on my Discord. And all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I had this message from a guy. And he's like, hey, are you talking about this person? And I said, well, yeah, how do you know him? He's like, I was an Australian SAS guy. I worked with him in Afghanistan. Well, I was on that same deployment. And so I said, well, yeah, I was there too. We worked with you guys all the time. And they're like, oh yeah, awesome. And I showed him a picture of a hat I had from their unit that I had gotten, that my buddy Frank had got for me. And I was like, yeah, I got one of y'all's hats. And he's like, yeah, I went by the name of X. Like he had a nickname. I turned the hat over. That dude's nickname was written on the inside of his hat, of my hat. Wow. That was his hat. Yeah. And so we were chatting, like, holy crap, dude. Like, imagine the small world. This was 2009, 2010.
That's
we were
crazy.
Working with these guys. Yeah.
Crazy, but
insane.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, totally awesome. But point two is, like, he remembers Frank and who this guy was and what a great character he was. So I think we're going to get a lot of support with that. I hope so. Even if we make $10, I don't care. That's $10 that we raise for charity. So we're gonna look to do that here in the future. I just got to figure out exactly how to do it the best way. So yeah, it's a busy time. I mean, it's I hate the fact that we have coronavirus, and it depends on what you think about it, whether it's real, whether it's fake, all this stuff.
Yeah, I don't even know. At the
end of the day,
anymore.
A lot of us are. Yeah, like I don't even want to get into it. But,
right.
Yeah. It's but end of the day, a lot of time on my hands, and so I'm trying to put it towards this, and it gives me something to do. So I've got a lot of things going on, and it's pretty exciting. It's a lot of fun. I mean, doing things like this is a lot of fun, and I'm sure you enjoy it. So the podcast is going to be kind of interesting as well. So we're looking forward to that. But yeah, October 14th, the website I believe is already up. It should be the Low Level Hell Podcast, and then we have a storefront, which I don't think it's live yet, but it will be at the same time. We'll have some product on there. And again, all that money that we raise will just go right back into building the community. Because running a server, I'm sure you know this, we have this isn't like some server running in a dude's basement. Like we're renting this server
Yeah,
space.
you got to pay for it, man. None of that stuff's
Right.
cheap either, dude.
Yeah, and it's a pretty high end thing that we've got. So there's money involved, and we're fine going out of pocket because to us it's almost like a hobby. You know, like we're putting whatever. I could be buying cars and fixing cars and spend a lot more money. So we kind of look at it that way. But it's an investment into the community. But if we can make a little back to offset that cost, then that's great. So.
That is all fantastic news. And again, man, if there's anything I can do to help you guys promote that through what I'm doing on my channel, I'm all for it, man. So anything I can do for you guys, I'll do it. You know, you just let me know. That's what it's all about. It really is. That's what it's all about. So I think the last question I have for you is, where did Casmo come from? Is that your old, call sign?
No. So it's funny that you bring up call signs because I actually want to do a video about that. The Army, like, we don't do call signs like that.
I didn't think you did. That's why I had to ask that, because I kind of remember that like they didn't have call signs. Okay.
No, it's almost like being in a club where, some guys will get little nicknames, and things like that. But for me, Casmo, so when I was a young pilot, I'm a very sarcastic person. And I think we were at a party, like a unit party, and everyone's getting drunk and stuff. And I must have said something to my commander at the time. And my wife made a joke that I was sarcastic or the great Sarcasmo or something. And my commander just took off on that because I flew with him all the time. They always joked I was the commander's driver. And, and so he would even to this day, like, he's a colonel in the Army, and he'll joke about the great Sarcasmo. So I kind of just took that and shortened it to Casmo. So that's where it came from.
That's awesome. Well, definitely it's been a blast, dude, and I'm so glad that you came on. I think this is probably one of the best interviews I've done yet, at least for the channel, and this is the kind of thing I love doing, getting out there and talking with the guys in the community, and this is the kind of content I think people want to see and hear more than anything. So definitely thanks for coming on, and keep me in the loop with everything you got going on, man. Like I said, I'll do anything I can to help you guys out, especially for a charity thing like that, plus anything I can do to help you promote your podcast, because that's what I'm all about more than anything.
Well, we got to get you on our server, man, because I know, like you said, you're not a big multiplayer, but guess what? Your cockpit's already hot for you, and we'll get you into some good multiplayer.
Oh, that's definitely sounds like something right up my alley, dude, because that's why I don't do a lot of online multiplayer. And I'd love to jump in there and do some, like, even flying circus stuff. That would be super fun. DCS stuff, I'm a Tomcat guy. I kind of dig the Tomcat. More than anything. It's so much fun.
I don't have it. I've only flown it when it was like free for a couple days, and it was cool. But I was like, I know I won't put any time into this right now. So
it's the best fixed wing aircraft they have in the game, dude. It really is.
That's fighting words now.
Oh, it is, but it really is. And like this is right up what you were talking about. You're talking about that, like, it's kind of 70s tech where things was simpler.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got some cool whiz bang stuff in it.
You can break it.
Yes.
It will let you break it.
Oh, and I have. but the most impressive thing to me about the flight model in the Tomcat is that when you're pushing it to the limit, she starts to shake and shudder. You know what I mean? And you can hear it. You can hear it going, like clinking and clanging, and it's just thrilling to be on that edge like that, you know what I mean, and still maneuvering and doing what you got to do. And I think that is the number one thing I think I like about it, other than the fact it's one of the most iconic, planes that have ever, graced television, right? Or media in general with, Top Gun.
Yeah, everybody knows that.
Everybody knows what that is, exactly. So that's something you should look into.
Oh.
But I've seen it for 20% at one of the last sales, so they might actually come around and do it a little bit less. But I'm telling you what, man, it's super cool, and I like the fact that I can just kind of do that little rotary dial thing and tell Jester to do shit in the back seat for me. You know what I mean? So like that's super cool. Really neat stuff though. But we definitely have to do this again sometime. So definitely, thanks for coming on, dude. And I'm sure the viewers are going to love this. And keep in touch.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. That was a fantastic interview, and that was really a lot of fun. Brian's a really cool guy, And it was really cool sitting down and hearing about all the things he had going on. It sounds like it's a pretty exciting time to be Brian over at CasmoTV. So I'd highly recommend checking out his channel. There's going to be a link to it in the video description. I'm also going to throw a link to Low Level Hell Discord server, so you can get over there and join up and check that out and see what he has going on. And be sure to watch for the Low Level Hell podcast that's going to be going live, I guess, in a couple days from now. By the time this video goes live. So as always, thanks so much for watching, guys. Please subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit that like button. And until next time, guys,